This episode's proudly sponsored by Rattlesnake Cables. Rattlesnake Cables offer a wide variety of premium U.S. milled cables for the stage and studio, with diverse customization to fit your cable needs. They build dependability and style into your signal path. Rattlesnake Cables, the sound choice. Hey, the Rattlesnake team is giving you a chance to win 2 free cables. Just head over to rattlesnakecables.com/giveaway/Chris and Rick to enter. And our listeners save 20% on all regular priced items by using the code CR20. That's code CR20 to save 20%. Hey people, do you want to get your music into Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Tidal, and all the rest of the streaming services? Check out DistroKid. It's affordable and super easy to use. I've used it to distribute my music and I really dig it. Our listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/talkguitars. That's 30% off for our listeners at distrokid.com/talkguitars. Go get it. Hey everybody, it's Chris and Rick Talk Guitars, and today we're going to delve into the topic of capos. Chris brought this up to me the other day, and I thought it was a great idea because I came to capos late, like I do. I'm a day late and a dollar short, so, you know, I'm always the last person to adopt some technology or some something. And so anyway, I finally realized that if I wanted to sing a song in a key that I could sing, hey, the capo's my friend. And so that was a huge game changer for me in terms of my own songs, and then also just if I wanted to play somebody else's song, I could transpose it with the use of a capo. I could still play open chords, all that other cool stuff, but then I could sing in a range that is comfortable for me. So that's how I really appreciated the capo. Chris, I want you to start your download on your feelings about the capo. Go.
First off, I should point out our brothers and sisters across the pond, they call it a capo.
Oh, a capo.
And there's been some argument that that's the true word, capo. I'll always call it capo because I'm from I'm a Yankee.
I remember when I was young, people used to call them cheaters. Did you ever hear that?
We'll talk about that. Yeah,
cool.
They're perceived to be a certain thing, which I don't think they are.
Got it.
Yeah, so capo, whatever.
I like capo.
So yeah, I have a huge, probably streaming back to the 80s when I got my first capo, and I established a long and fruitful relationship with it.
Nice.
And, I'll also start out about something that you kind of mentioned too. You called it like a cheater.
Yeah.
I've heard many disparaging remarks about the capo, like you're using it to cheat or it's cheater. It's like if you just play the guitar like a real guitar, blah, blah, blah. It's not rock and roll or whatever. And I like to address that. First of all, I assume when they say it's a cheater, they just mean that, you're going to learn the open chords positions and you're just going to move up and down the neck to play all your songs.
Yeah.
And I guess if that was the case, that's kind of like cheating. But I've known millions of capo players and not one of them uses it like that.
Yeah.
There's many uses for it. And there's 3 that I've done. One of them was kind of like what you were saying, as a tool for dialing into my vocal range.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you want to do that fast. So you use the capo to zero in on where your voice really starts to work with the song.
Yeah.
And, sometimes having those open chords available, it helps you just quickly arrive at that point. It doesn't mean that that's where the song's going to stay capoed at that position. Another thing I use it for is voicings. And this is the one that I use it for most now, is for voicings. For me, guitar playing, I want to learn more about chord science and how chords work together and frequencies and all this shit. So I use it for voicing. I don't use it very often, but when I do now, 99% of the time, it's because I need this voicing for this chord. There's a certain part of the chord that I can only make by using the capo to get access to an open string that I'm going to the chord sounds a certain way. Perfect example of that is tumbling dice. If you put your guitar in Keith Richards tuning and you just move the capo up and down the neck, as soon as you find that, you hear it. It just jumps out. That is the perfect place for that song. Cool. It just comes alive. So I use it mainly now just to get for a certain voicing for a chord. And a lot of it is like the A. I like the open A shape, let's say. You know what I mean? Like hitting that open string and just finger across there for the A. And that's really cool. And a lot of times I like to take the 2 chord which is the B minor, and
Uh-huh.
I'll make the minor seventh version of that. So it's like a B minor seventh A, and then you hammer on to the B minor seventh, and that is basically I'm going A to D that way instead of A to the actual D chord because the minor seventh is really close to the fourth chord.
Uh-huh.
And that works all the way up and down the neck. And I'll use that a lot of times just with my finger barring without the capo and do that. But every once in a while, you just want that open string in there. And
Yeah.
that's where that, it'll just sing. An example, not related to that, but an example of my capo use was take the song that's the intro and the outro to this podcast, this
Uh-huh.
room full of guitars. That was written with the capo. And I don't think I would have written that song without the capo. I
That's
moved around
cool.
the neck and I found the position where my voice kind of fit. My whole time I've been writing songs, I'm just trying to write Dead Flowers and Sweet Virginia.
Of course.
Just everything I write is like aiming for that, but never reaching that. But so, yeah, the song was kind of like a strummed in the capo at the third fret. I'm
Uh-huh.
playing an F with using the G position. And,
Oh, that's
and if I
cool.
played that song on acoustic guitar now, I would probably capo and play it,
Yeah.
which is another point that I need to point out later about transposing and shit like that. But
Yeah.
right now I'm talking about the uses. So I'm either using it as a tool for finding my vocal, finding the perfect spot for the voice.
Uh-huh.
For songwriting, I'm using it for a voicing that I'm looking in the context of a band where I want my guitar to reside in a certain set of frequencies or just a certain sound that I'm looking for a riff.
That's
That'll
cool.
determine if I use a capo. And the third one is that I'll use sometimes and mostly on the acoustic guitar. And this is a very traditional use of the capo is in like bluegrass music. You need access to open strings to do a
Yeah.
lot of these G runs and C runs and D runs. And for droning on some things, you need access to the open strings. And these are things that you can't do without a
Yeah.
capo. You just can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of these are subtle differences, things that the capo will bring. But if you think about it, the difference between a great guitar player and a good guitar player is often something really subtle. Basically, those three things, either using it as a tool for songwriting, placing my voice, as a voicing tool for getting my chords to sit where they want them in the context of a song.
Uh-huh.
And the third one is if I'm going to do like any kind of bluegrass stuff, like,
Cool.
or droney, or even like droney, like I used to do instrumental music a lot, where it was like I'd play at like a gallery and just play as background music. I use the capo a lot to get a lot of droning things going on with a lot of reverb and shit like that.
That's
So that's
cool.
what I use them for. I don't use them ever just to like play something that would play in the open position up further in the neck. It always, if I'm up further in the neck and I'm playing in open positions, because it's the sound I was looking for that brought
Yeah.
me there and
Yeah.
not the cheating aspect of it. Is that when you said like they were referred to as cheaters? Is that what you took them to
No,
mean?
I think it was just to me that term was used when I was really young. And I just
Right.
when somebody said it to me, it just sounded more like slang for it
Right.
rather than implications. You know what I mean? Oh
Right.
yeah, it's a cheater. It's like it's just a fast and easy way to do what we're talking about. The different uses of the capo. So I don't think at the time when it was said to me when I was really young that that it was loaded with this negative connotation. But that leads us to like, what are some of the negative connotations you've seen online or heard about people kind of deriding the use of the capo, which is weird to me.
Well, it is weird, but everything's weird about the internet. No, people say that they'll say that it's not very rock and roll to use a capo, and I would agree. If you're going to do like metal or maybe some forms of hard rock, it's not really hard rock and roll. But tumbling dice to me is pretty fucking rock and roll.
Exactly.
I mean that's kind of.
Yeah.
I think if you're doing any sort of roots based music, bluegrass, country, things like that, folk
Yeah.
music, I think it can rock in those forms of music anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, it does seem to people to be something that someone is kind of just lambing out and not doing their due diligence as a guitar player by using a capo, which is absolutely not true. And that was my whole
Exactly.
point.
Well, and it's
So
the opposite of that. It's a guitar player trying to be better and I just think of all the people that I know off the top of my head that use capos, Joan Baez, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, like all
right,
these freaking cats, like you're saying, like Wilco, all these people use capos and they use them probably for the reasons you cited. And I kind of happened upon what you were talking about voicing wise by trying to accommodate my vocal range, right? Like that song I sent you recently played
right.
in different keys. And you were saying immediately, boom, that one where I was capoed on the fifth fret. Wow. Okay. The song is starting to jump out. And which I agree with. And listening to it comparatively to the previous versions I had where I was lower in tuning and all that stuff, it is night and day. You can see, and the voicing of the guitar is cool. Like you're saying, you can capo on different frets and play chords, and it'll sound totally different. And you will get these overtones, or like you're saying, these voicings that just start to sing or chime or do different cool things that it wouldn't do if you were playing it without a capo or capoed in a different position. And so, yeah, I'm the same way. I think the opposite. I don't think it's a way to like take a shortcut or do things. I think it's just used as a tool that many guitar players use to broaden their ability as songwriters, as vocalists, and guitar players. So, yeah,
It's a
that's the way I look at it.
it's a sonic Leatherman. That's kind of how I look at it.
I
But
love
no,
that.
my capo use has changed. When I had that band that was a roots rock band in the
Uh-huh.
late 90s and 2000s, Evangeline, it was country rock. And I was singing, but I wasn't the primary singer. There was a woman singer. So the capo was very important in that band for me in the writing stage, because a lot of
Uh-huh.
those songs I wrote with capos. Sometimes if I was singing, they didn't stay capoed. When I played them live, I'd transpose them to like open. But a lot of them did because the singer, I'd come up with a song. I'd probably use the capo to write the song. It would help me find the place and, come up with all the riffs and all the little things. And then I'd bring it into the band and I'd have to find the key that where my singer was comfortable and where she could really use her voice. And so the capo was an easy way to just move the shit around until I found
Totally.
it.
Yeah.
And then when I found it, I always give it if I'm writing a song with a capo, unless it's like it's like a riff or a hook or something that
Uh-huh.
the capo is part of that you can't really do without it. I'll just check to see maybe I can play this transposed and it'll be one less thing that I have to think about, the capo, dealing with the capo. But a lot of times it won't. I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
that's the essence of the song is the capo. So that will be it. But now that I'm just a guitar player in a band, and the band that I'm in now, the Riff Brokers, I mean, it's probably the other guitar player, probably in the 90s percentage wise, where he uses a capo. He writes for the capo and he uses the capo live a lot. So I try to play capo as not, and I shouldn't say I don't try to play capo as much. I try to complement his guitar as much. And a lot of times I'm like, if he's capoed, especially in the middle of the neck, it's going to need some more lower frequencies from the other
Yeah.
guitar. So I'll look for things in the open positions or just lower down the neck. And also in the last few years, I don't play chords as much as I used to. I'm doing like a lot of like partial chords or riffs, or like I'll do sixths a lot of times. I mean, that was something I learned in the John Prine band. So a lot of times I'm not actually playing chords. I'm just playing just a couple of notes or something like that, or partial chords.
Yeah.
So that's the way I use it now. And what dictates if I'm using a capo or not is I'll hear the other part and I'll look for a part and I'm like, okay, I got a lick. I got a lick or a riff that really works and makes this song move, but I need that A position. I need that A position to get something that I'm looking for. So if it's not in A, I'll have to put the capo in a place where I can play the A. Like say if it's in C, I'd put it at the third fret, and then I can do my A business there and have all that access to that stuff. And
Yeah.
that's what I'll do. I'm actually in two bands with the same singer guitar player guy, and there's only maybe two songs or something where we're capoed at the same spot. And that's another important thing. And another cool thing about the capo is if two people are using capos, they don't have to be the same spot. And sometimes it's good if they're not the same
Yeah.
spot. So,
Yeah.
but there's like two songs that I can think of for sure. I'm in the same spot, and it's not because I'm lazy. It's because I need these open strings. I do these open string runs, and I can
Yeah.
only do them. If it's not in A, I can't do those open string runs. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, I mean, I put a lot of thought into this shit sometimes
I
probably
love
too.
it.
But yeah, and it's great for that. I've made a conscious effort, since I'm not like in a band that's singing and writing and all that stuff now. It's like I try to get away from it as much as possible, just because it's like one less thing to have to deal with. But it's such a powerful tool that I still use it, because there's sometimes when it's just the thing that I need.
Totally. Because talking about transposition, like you were, I've tried to do that on the guitar many times in the past, learning a song or trying to transpose it. And often, one of the coolest things about the guitar to me are open strings or open chords. And they just sound cool. They ring, they're jangly, and of course, bar chords are great in certain contexts, and other chords voicings are fine. But for me, a lot, like you're saying, open notes or open chords just jangle and sing, and so that is, it's not the piano's. a different instrument, right? You can play, you got all these keys, you can transpose a lot more easily than the guitar. The guitar is its own weird little animal. But so I find the capo extremely useful for that. Because, for instance, the song I was talking about, it's like, I want to retain those open chords because they sound cool. And I'm even doing partial chords or, augmented chords or something like that, where
Right.
I'm leaving some of the, open strings singing while I'm playing partial chords. And it sounds bitchin'. And I didn't want to lose that, right? I didn't want to try to transpose the song and then lose these beautiful, because also I think that's the nature of the song. It's this kind of jangly, weird
Right.
song. So I didn't want to lose the character of the song by having to transpose it rather than using a capo.
You said something that made me think of something too. You mentioned the piano, and that's another thing with the capo that I've always been aware of is, and in more backing out more generally, I learned very early on that the acoustic guitar is not the electric guitar. They're completely, you have to think of them as completely different instruments. And it's kind of like the piano is not an organ. You know what I mean? The
Right,
piano
right.
is
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
percussive. It's like, and you play everything that sounds good on a piano doesn't sound good on an organ, vice versa.
Right,
Some
right.
things do, and that's the same with acoustic guitar. You might find that on the acoustic guitar, the capo gets you exactly what you want. This extra sustain that you might need. And if you bring it to the electric guitar and try to do the same thing, sometimes you might find that there's just too much. There's too many mid frequencies where you're at, and it just sounds kind of messy. It can work either way. It can work good or bad, but that's just one thing that I've always been aware of. So a lot of times I will play the same song on acoustic guitar with a capo and not on the electric guitar. And
Ah,
that's cool. And another thing I just thought about when I was saying this, a real world example of acoustic versus electric was on this last record that recorded with the Riff Brokers. Nick, the singer's guitar player, had this really cool song that he gave me it was on his iPhone. It's him and acoustic guitar doing the song. And
uh-huh.
he was using drop D tuning, but he had it at the second fret. So he was playing it, drop E basically. And he had this cool song and a great riff. And immediately I'm like, that is so cool. I kind of keyed into the openness of that, the big open E chord and the way that it was kind of compressed and just the rhythm of that thing. And I thought
Uh-huh.
that was so cool. And I made a guitar part, this jangly guitar part over top of it. And then we went to do it electrically and everything kind of changed. At first, I was kind of hanging on to that. Like, I want it to be like, maybe we
Yeah.
should do it acoustic. I really love that thing. But the more I listened to it, the more something else came in. You know what I mean? It was a great song, so it just transposed really well itself. But at the same time, I had to shift my thinking because there was something on the acoustic guitar that I really keyed into. It's like, that's the song, that's the essence
Yeah.
of the song. But once we did it and we got the speed and the feel right, it's like, okay. It's like he gets two songs basically. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
It's like
Yeah.
two different songs. They sound totally different depending on what you play them on. And that was just a winded way of saying that it really helps to keep in mind that acoustic and electric guitar are two very different instruments. And that's a really good thing because,
It is
it
a
just
good
gives
thing.
you, and then you add the capo to that and you got four instruments.
Well,
Yeah.
it is. That's a great call out. I mean, they are different animals. I just like what you say about using the capo as a tool for voicings and experimentation. I mean, I've seen some people partial capo a guitar, right? Or
Yeah. I just did
open
that
tuning.
today.
Yeah, and that's cool too. And this kind of dovetails into what Chris and I have always talked about before is like as a guitar player, use whatever tools are available to you to inspire yourself, because that's what it's all about. And if you are struggling with a song or struggling with chord progressions or something like that, open tunings or capos are a great way to try to bust out of some gridlock you're having with creativity, man. And that's all it is. It's just a tool. And so, yeah, and I think it's rock and roll as hell. I mean, again, like Albert Collins, capos on the fucking 12th fret or whatever the fuck he
He's
it
way
was
up
like,
there. Yeah.
but I'm sure for him it was about voicings, about what the sound he
It
wanted
is.
to
It's
get,
totally.
he wanted to get this ice picky aggressive sound, and that's how he got it. And other blues artists capo the shit out of their guitar too. So I think, and Tom Petty, all these guys. So I think the whole, capos aren't rock and roll. We might have to have a T-shirt that says capos are rock and roll or something like that. But I
Right.
think it's bunk. I think it's totally rock and roll, and it's just another way for you to achieve whatever you're trying to achieve as a guitar player. You know,
Yeah. I take him for granted. That's why this topic came up because
I
I hadn't
love it.
thought about him forever. And then I was listening to some old music and I'm like, oh, I used to capo all the time. And I thought about my capo use and how it's changed. We should talk a little bit about technical things that come with the capo
Yeah,
because it does take some
yeah.
thought The first capo I ever got, I think, was a shub. It's like I remember my brother had. I don't know if you remember the kind that were like
That's what
stretchy.
I
It looked
had.
almost
That
like
was
a
my
hair
first
thing,
capo.
and those are horrible,
Yeah.
unwieldy. I tried it once. I'm like, no, this doesn't work. So I got a shub, and I learned a few things about capoing on electric guitar. This is super important. Your guitar has to be set up right, or you're just gonna drive yourself fucking nuts. Because if your nut's a little bit high, every time you strap the capo down, you're gonna be
Yeah.
sharp enough to be
Yeah.
noticed. And you have to kind of put it right next to the fret as close as you can. You have to make sure you come right down on it and you have a light
Yeah.
touch. A lot of people that I've played in bands with, one way to approach, playing a capo electrically live is you just tune after every
Yeah.
song and you just make sure it's right on tune. If I had to do that, I wouldn't play like what I do is I just make sure my guitars are set up really well, and be very careful where I put it. And I just play with an extra light touch because if I looked at the tuner when I put a capo on, I'm probably a little bit
Yeah.
sharp. But in the context of the song, it it's like maybe a little bit of chorusing. It's not a
Yeah.
bad thing, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so I just went that route that, I just make sure. I have had guitars though, when I first started to use capos with them, I had to do some nut work because they were so
Yeah.
high that when you strapped it on there, they were way sharp. The intonation thing with the capo it takes some thought.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up too, because I know it can even vary from capo to capo, right? Because
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
capo some songs in the YouTube band, and I use this Dunlop capo or capo. I'm going to use capo for now, and I like that.
Yeah, go ahead. You do that side, I'll do this side.
And I noticed that if I, or I should say, I have Kaiser capos and I've got a Dunlop and I've got a bunch of different, I've got a shit ton just floating around. But what I was going to say is I noticed that if I use a certain capo on a certain guitar, it doesn't, it doesn't go out of tune as much, I don't notice sharpness or any weirdness with a certain capo. And like you said, though, it is critical to have your guitar set up well so that the sharpness when you apply a capo doesn't whack your guitar out, or that you have to tune.
Right.
Because I don't have to tune much if I play the capo and then take it off. And I just strum and make sure I place the capo, like you're saying, right up against the fret. And I strum it a few times and make sure it's in tune, and boom, I'm ready to go. But just that's something
Yeah,
to remember too, is like the capo itself. Maybe it's the amount of pressure the spring has on the capo, or
it
the
is.
amount
Yeah.
of padding on the fretboard side of the capo. So it could be any of those things too. But another thing to talk about in terms of this is the technology in capos has come so far. Like you're saying, it's like it used to be a pencil with a rubber band, and then the
Yeah.
stretchy material that was the next evolution. But now, capos are just the grab and go. So using a capo now is so much easier than it was before,
Yeah.
and their quality.
Yeah, I like the Kaiser that's
Yeah.
got the big spring on it. I like that for electric guitars, but on acoustic guitar, I love the Page. I think you turned me on to that. The Page, it goes around the
That is a
strings,
cool
and
one.
you just leave it on
Yeah.
the neck, right by the nut, so you
Yeah.
don't know it's
Yeah.
there. And so it's super lightweight and it's always there. And it's like if I pick up my acoustic guitar, I really want a capo
Yeah.
near me at some time because something might come to me. And the Kaisers are just really quick. I lost so many Kaisers. That's one thing to be aware of. When I was a singer and like I played guitar, sang, had a harmonica in a rack around my neck, and I would always put my Kaiser on the mic stand. That's a
I
really bad
believe it.
idea. I think the Tractor has about 50 my Kaiser capos. I don't put them on I don't like
The
anything on the
headstock.
headstock of my
Yeah. Yeah.
guitar,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't put them on there. I
Yeah.
just put them on my pedal board or on the top of my amp, and I haven't
Nice.
lost one in
Oh,
years now.
good. Good.
So
Good. Good.
yeah, knock on wood. So yeah, that knowing how to do it, fret height too. If you have really tall jumbo frets
Yeah.
and you use a capo that's got a firm grip, that'll put you sharp too.
Yeah.
When we're in the studio, if I'm using a capo, I tune to the capo because that makes sense. And then you're right on.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've never had a problem. Like, the sort of a sidebar is whenever people talk about intonation, they always are referencing getting the open strings to match the 12th fret. And
Yeah.
that's like intonating guitar. Intonation, when it comes to playing guitar, is a whole different thing. And this is part of it. You know what I mean? Playing with a capo, I mean, as a guitar player, you're kind of responsible for playing in tune.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the many things that you have to learn is dealing with the intro, the quirks of guitars because they're different for every
Oh,
guitar.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like for instance, my Telecaster, when I'm tuning that, I have flattened the G string just ever slightly because that guitar plays sweeter if I do that.
Yeah.
When you do that for a bunch of years, you get kind of cocky. Like, I have good intonation. I know how to work around all these guitars. But if you ever want to feel bad about that, jump on pedal steel for about 5 minutes and then learn what shitty intonation is. I mean, that
Oh
takes
man.
years
I
to get good on that shit.
yeah.
Or violin or anything like that, something where there's no frets. But yeah, just because it has frets doesn't mean that you just don't have to still like, have good playing intonation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just I don't know where that came from, but
No,
the capo introduced some technical things that you have to deal with oftentimes. You know what I mean? Especially when you're playing in a band.
yeah.
If you were a singer-songwriter and you played a capo, you'd tune your guitar and you'd put the capo at blah, blah fret. As long as you sat it correctly,
Yeah.
it would be fine because you might be sharp, but you're sharp across the board because it's just raising the whole thing. So, but when you're playing in the band and you have other instruments, it becomes you have to be more diligent and more kind of picky about it. So,
Well, and like you're saying, there's these other variables involved. I mean, you're capoing it on this fret and you're putting pressure on the strings from the nut to the fret. And depending on your action, it's going to, go sharp. So, yeah, I mean, it does introduce more variables that you have to be cognizant of and adjust for as a guitar player.
right.
Yeah, which makes sense.
I had this capo once that I wish I still had. It was weird, but it had these little discs over each string.
Oh,
So
really?
you'd capo it and you could flip the discs up so you could open up certain
Oh,
strings.
that's cool.
And it was super cool. And I just today, you mentioned that, like capoing certain strings. I did like an open E tuning by just capoing from the A down to the skinny E and left the fat E open. So you could do open E,
Yeah.
tuning. So, and that was I used a shub for that one. The Kaiser would probably work, but yeah. I've got 3 types of capos here now. Like the shubs. The shubs are cool because they're nice and lightweight and you can really adjust how much they clamp. You have control over that. So if you have really high frets, a shub might be nice because you can control how much pressure they put down. Same with the Page capo.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would use a Page on an electric guitar. You know what I mean?
No, but I think that's a great point is because the shub and the Page allows you to adjust the pressure yourself, whereas the Kaiser and the Dunlop and other ones that are just spring loaded, that's the pressure you get. So if you're a player and you really want to, you want to mitigate those variables as much as possible, I would get a shub or something where you can adjust the tension on the string.
I owe a lot to the capo. I will never. And if somebody did want to just use it as a cheater when they're learning guitar, I don't even have a problem with that.
No.
But I always just want to, whenever I see somebody disparaging a capo, like it's not rock and roll or it's cheating or something like that, I always want to jump to its defense, but I never do. Because no, I owe so much to it. There's songs that would not exist if it wasn't for a capo.
Yeah.
That's how I write. I grab an acoustic guitar and a capo and I just start moving shit around, humming, whatever, playing like little riffs. That's what I had to watch out for in Evangeline too. Is like, because that was kind of a country folk rock thing. Is I get kind of samey with a capo. I have these little things that I do around the G runs or things like that, and I kind of do them all the time. And if you start doing them everywhere all the time, it's kind of I had to keep myself slap my hands to not do that. Because there are so much you can do with them that takes you away from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to use this to get myself away from my bad habits. And you can use that for that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To find different things.
Totally.
Right.
But also, when we're talking about this and people kind of disparaging it, it's like, if you ever have doubts, just look at all the amazing players that you know and love that probably use a capo or do use capos, just because it's a tool. It's a tool to be used by, people for different purposes, like you mentioned. So it's rock and roll as hell.
It's, jazz, maybe you might not want to use it. Classical, might not.
Classical players use capos.
Do they really?
Yeah, they do. They do.
They must have like wide ones for that.
They do.
Like extra
yeah.
wide.
But I mean, again, it's for the same reason. It's like they want to maintain voicings or chord phrasings that they want to maintain, but they do. Classical guitarists use capos for sure.
I will die on the capo hill myself.
And you'll die on, you probably have a capo hill, all the capos you've lost or given
I
away.
do. The Tractor Tavern, I should go down there. Hey, do you have a box here with 500 of those?
Oh my God.
I don't know. There's a psychological thing that I did that might help the fact that I haven't lost one in years. Is when I got a new Kaiser, just took some, what do you call it? Pink fingernail polish, and painted the top of it pink. So I knew it was mine. And I haven't lost that one since. And that's been about 3 or 4 years. So I think just sometimes just doing that little thing just kind of is the extra step I need. But I seriously, how many times I just left the stage and had my capo hanging up on the mic stand and never realized it until like the next day.
I would love to hear other
Yeah.
people's stories about that.
Those are like $15 a piece. They're probably more now. They're
They
probably
are.
20 to
I know.
30
Well, and I keep buying them because I've got them in guitar cases that are not here, and I need a capo, and it's like, God, so I'll go get another capo. So I probably have 10 at least, maybe more than that now, including the ones you mentioned, the Page and the Dunlop. But so I hope you guys dug this one. Let us know if you've got capo stories or how you feel about capos. We'd love to hear about it. We're still a part of the Ruinous Media Network. Consume us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And check us out on chrisandricktalkguitars.com. That's our website. And we've got other things like a blog and a way for you to buy t-shirts if you want a t-shirt or swag. And until next time.